Hey guys, this is Paul from Montana, and this video is intended to help you build your own instrumentation panel for your wave runner. This is a 1996 Wave Venture 1100, and it's this instrumentation panel that I built. You could probably make one for the Wave Raider series and any of the older wave runners that are kind of this vintage here. I don't know much about the new ones, but these machines are getting up there in age, obviously, so if you're going to fix them, you got to get kind of creative sometimes. And fortunately, if you work on these a lot, you'll find that engine components are pretty easy to come by, but some of this other stuff you're stuck buying used. And here's the instrumentation panel that I took out of it. You can see that the LCD screen is bad on there. I'd have to guess that there's plenty of machines out there that look like this. You can find these on eBay used, but they're old. So I mean, you just really might be throwing your money out the window if you buy one and it just lasts a while. So hey, why not make a new one? So I want to show you how. At first, I'd like to start out by saying I'm not a professional mechanic or wave runner technician. So you might see something here and you'd be thinking to yourself, what the heck is he doing? That doesn't seem that's not right. But I do the best I can to try to figure stuff out, and I built this and it works. So that's all I can say about it, really. Also, the warning lights on these gauge clusters, you can see them down in the bottom. The particular ones that you'd be worried about are oil and over temp light. If you remove this cluster, you are no longer going to have those warning lights, so be aware of that. I can live without it because I run this machine on mixed fuel, so I don't care about oil level. It no longer exists. And I also put an over temp light on my gauge panel here. This machine actually has a thermocouple back here in the rear of this of the exhaust housing, that when it over temps, it actually shorts out something in the CDI that makes this machine run very, very boggy, almost as though it was running on one cylinder, and it does not rev up very high. So that's kind of a safety mechanism all by itself. So if you didn't have an over temp light and your machine's running like that, chances are it is overheated. But it's pretty easy to wire in an over temp light. I'm going to show you all these things, and you can make a decision if this is something you want to tackle. I'm just going to do a real basic overview, kind of what has to happen before I get into more detail. The first thing you're going to do is decide if this is something that you really want to do. Do you want to lose your warning lights? What do you want to do? Then you're going to want to buy the parts, all the pieces that you need to do this job, and I'll explain it at the end of the video. I'll have a whole list of parts that you can get before you even get into this thing. You want to disconnect the connectors under the hood. I think there's 4 or 5 of them, but they all go to your old instrumentation panel. I think it'd probably be better to show you these connectors. See, there's 3 of them right there for sensors, and there's 1 that's cut. I'll explain that in a minute, why that's cut. You're going to remove the gauge cluster, the original one from the machine, cut the 4-pin connector from the gauge cluster, and build a new wire panel, and you're going to install the new panel. So let's get into it. I'll show you all the details. So after you get the gauge cluster out, the original one, you're going to want to cut the 4-pin 4-wire connector off the back. It consists of a red, black, green, and wire, and red, black, green, and pink wire. Cut it off pretty close to the instrumentation assembly, because you want lots of extra wire when you go to do your wiring, and this is no good anymore. So the next thing you do is you cut fiberglass material. Material to make your panel at 5.5 by 3 inches. You could use fiberglass, plastic, sheeting, plexiglass from the hardware store, whatever you think you would want to put in your machine. This is an example of a fiberglass piece that I used for my first take on this. I didn't use it because I put it in and the color kind of was off. It just looked really strange to me, and I wanted it to have a professional look, and I think that this, this black kind of looks cooler. Okay, so cut your material 5.5 by 3/8 inch thick, and you draw an X in your material to find center, and then you drill a hole in the center, cut a hole 2 3/8, which is also 60 millimeters. The instrumentation, the new GPS speedometer that goes in here that I'm going to specify for you uses this hole. A lot of them do. It's a very common hole size for marine applications. You can use a hole saw or have a machine shop do it, which will cost you an arm and a leg, I'm sure, but that's how I did it. I work in a machine shop from time to time, so as I was able to just do this at work one day, it took me just a few minutes. You could probably cut it out with a Dremel and then smooth to the line that you have on here. Hole saws are readily available, like on Amazon, if you order one to do this job. Or you could probably go to the hardware store or Home Depot or whatever and find something that's 2 3/8. That's up to you. Just make sure that you put it in a vise before you cut it, because it could get away from you and spin around in circles if you're using a hole saw. Step number 3, you want to drill a 3/8 diameter hole in the top left corner, 7/8 inches in and 7/8 inches down. It's a 3/8 hole. This is for the switch. The switch is used to turn the GPS off and on. I did not explain that. Right up here is an on-off switch for the GPS. The GPS will not shut off on its own. This particular one won't. I kind of wish that I had found one that would maybe shut off after, an hour or two, but so I had to put a switch in there. And honestly, these GPSs don't consume much power, so if you left it hooked up to your battery for a couple days, it's only going to draw 0.1 or 0.2 volts. I tested that using a small computer battery that I had, and I kept looking at the voltage, and after 3 or 4 days it only drew 0.4 volts off the battery, so that's pretty good. But still, the on-off switch is pretty nice to have. Okay, step number 4. You could do this at any time, but you could do it at the very end. But you could put 3M auto tape on here, and you might have to cut it like a 1/4 inch wide to kind of make it past your holes, because they're close to the edge in these 2 locations. 3M tape is really wicked sticky stuff, so you could mount it to your wave runner using mounts. I actually fabricated a couple mounts, and used screws, but I'm trying to make this really simple so you can knock it out in a couple hours and just stick it on there and off you go. So this is really an easy way to go, but keep in mind when you install this on your machine, you're going to have to really concentrate to get this on there square, because once it's stuck, you might have a heck of a time getting it off there. So you'd probably want to lay something on your machine and tape it on that makes it straight, and kind of slide it in and tape it down. Excuse me. The next thing you do is install your GPS speedometer and your switch into the plate that you just put together. The next step is to wire the switch to the GPS, the very first step of wiring. So the switch has 2 black wires on it. Either black wire, doesn't matter. You hook it to the black wire on your GPS. And you can use wire nuts, butt connectors. The best way to do it is like shrink tubing and solder. But if you don't have soldering iron and those kinds of tools, wire nut and butt connectors okay. Just make sure that you stuff your wire nut with some RTV or something, or tape it up real good. Try to keep water out of it. These things get wet, and I can tell you your wiring job's not going to last if you don't do it the best way that you can. 7, you want to wire your GPS speedometer and switch to the Yamaha cluster connector that you cut off of your old gauge. So you have your GPS here, and you hook your red wire to the red wire on the connector, and the black wire from the switch, the other black wire, goes to the black wire on the Yamaha connector. And you might need to, you know, patch in some extra wire or something to make all this even lengths. There's still 2 more wires left on this connector. There's a green one and a pink one. You don't use either one of those. So if you don't intend on putting temp light on there, you need to isolate those by taping them up real well. You don't want them touching together, grounding out, doing anything like that. So at this stage of the game, if you just wire in your switch, your GPS, red and black, you're done. If that's all you want to do is the GPS. However, if you want to put over temp light on there, like I did, you just want to take a look at this schematic here, and I'll try to help you through that here. So the 4-wire connector that you cut off your gauge cluster, black is ground, the pink is a thermocouple wire, the red is 12 volts DC that's present from the battery. Doesn't matter if the machine's running or not, there's always 12 volts there. Green is 6 volts to 10 volts, depends on RPMs. And I believe, I don't know this for sure, but I believe that that's reporting to the gauge if your battery's charging. And as a side note, I'll tell you that when you don't have a gauge cluster in your machine, the battery is still charging. So you're not going to lose charging functions or anything by removing your gauge cluster. It still all works the way that it should. So to wire in a light, you want to buy yourself a 12 volt light somewhere out on the internet, and has to be waterproof. I use like an actual wave runner light from a Kawasaki, and you want to wire the pink wire and red wire to that light. Pink wire grounds out when the thermocouple trips, and the red wire is power. So boom, your light will come on if you wire it that way. And then the red wire off this, of course, is also being used for power to the GPS. So it has a dual function. I hope that makes sense. So last but not least, I'll show you some of the parts that went into this. This is the GPS unit that I bought off eBay. Sorry, I don't have a product number. I couldn't find one for some reason, but that's what it is. You should be able to find that pretty easy. There's lots of different ones that you can buy that are the same hole size. There's tons of them out there. It just depends on how much money you want to spend. Here's the waterproof switch that I used I bought it from Amazon. Here's your part number. You can get fiberglass from McMaster Car online. There's a part number. Or go to the hardware store, you know, wherever you got to go to find the material that you want to make this work. 3M auto tape, trim tape, of course that's at hardware stores, auto part stores, virtually anywhere you go. 60 millimeter or 2 3/8 hole saw. You can get that off Amazon. Probably find one at Harbor Freight. I didn't look, but I'll bet you they have, you know, one or the other of these. Wire nuts, butt connectors, shrink wrap, solder, whatever you need to do your wiring. And of course electrical tape. The total you'll have into this is something like $87. It cost me less because I already had a lot of these things. All I had to do was buy the GPS unit and the switch. So for me it was $60 or something. But I hope I give you enough detail and not too much to make this confusing. And when it's done inside the machine, you know, I basically wired up all the sensor wires and put them in a bundle here just to keep them out of the way. And then here's my new connector and wire harness. I actually put shrink wrap on all this and soldered it, so it's really good connection. So there you go. I used this a couple weekends ago. I went out on the lake and it updates really fast. Tells you your speed, your distance, and it worked fantastic. I thought it was nice also to have the ability to look at my battery voltage, see if I needed to charge the battery like the night before I went out. So I really hope this helps you, and I hope this is something you want to take on, and this video gets you through it. Thanks for watching.